One voice and a quiet question people still ask decades later. Can two people become so emotionally connected that they slowly stop meeting the rest of the world? And if that happens, what happens when one of them is suddenly gone? Now, before we begin, thank you for being part of Mind Bending Mysteries. And if you truly enjoy this content, please like, subscribe, and turn notifications on so you don't miss future episodes. And if you know someone who would enjoy these stories too, sharing the videos truly helps the channel grow. And honestly, we're just getting started. Welcome to Mind Bending Mysteries. My name is Tammy, and tonight's story is different. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't happen. No hidden tunnels, no strange symbols, no monsters, just two sisters, and a connection so unusual, people around them didn't know what to do with it. And everything you're about to hear is based on documented interviews, books, psychiatric reporting, public accounts, and the real lives of the women known as June and Jennifer Gibbons. Now, some interpretations remain debated. This is not a ghost story. This is not a supernatural story, but honestly, by the end, you may decide to feel stranger than one, because mystery without discipline becomes misinformation. Now, the story begins in the 1960s in the United Kingdom, more specifically Wales. And the twins were born in 1963 to parents originally from Barbados. Now, their names were June Gibbons and Jennifer Gibbons. Now, picture this. You're a child. You move somewhere you already feel different. You struggle socially. You don't feel understood. People stare. People make comments. People treat you like you don't belong. And then there is one person who understands everything. Your twin. Not just your sister. Your mirror. Your teammate. Your safe place. And that sounds beautiful, and at first it probably was. But according to people who knew them, something slowly changed. Teachers noticed. Family noticed. Classmates noticed. The girls talked, just not to anyone else. And at first, people assumed shyness, then anxiety, then something more serious. Because over time, June and Jennifer reportedly spoke less and less to other people. And eventually, their silence became famous. And this is important. Hold on, because this is where the story changes. The twins could speak. They weren't physically unable. They simply stopped speaking to most people. And that distinction matters because psychologically, those are two very different things. And according to accounts, when they did speak to each other, they often spoke rapidly, so quickly that many people struggled to understand them. People described it almost like hearing another language. Now imagine being their parents. Your daughters are healthy. They talk, they laugh, but mostly only with each other. And that's difficult because human beings connect through communication. And the more isolated the twins became, the more their words seemed to shrink, until eventually their world mostly became each other. And now I know what some of you are thinking. Twins are close, that's normal, and you're right. Twin relationships can be incredibly strong, but according to many accounts, this became something deeper. The sisters created stories, characters, fantasy worlds, entire private universes. They wrote constantly, journals, short stories, ideas, conversations, and writing became one of the ways they communicated with themselves and each other. And at first, that sounds creative, maybe even beautiful. But according to later descriptions, their relationship slowly became emotionally consuming. And observers later discovered moments where they seemed less like two people and more like one system. One speaks, one follows, one withdraws, the other withdraws. Almost like their emotional lives had become synchronized. Now, this next part surprised me because eventually the sisters started acting out, stealing, breaking rules, setting fires, and eventually they entered the criminal justice and psychiatric systems. Now, they were later sent to Broadmoor Hospital. Now, Broadmoor was known for treating severe psychiatric cases, and years later, people would question whether the twins truly belonged there, because they weren't known as violent predators. Yet, they spent years inside institutions, and according to reports, their relationship became even more unusual. Staff described them mirroring each other, movements, expressions, posture, emotions, and eventually, something deeply unsettling began appearing in later interviews. The idea that one of them needed to leave for the other to truly live. Now hold on. This next part gets repeated online a lot, so let's be careful. There are different versions of exactly how this was said over the years, but according to public accounts, the twins reportedly discussed feeling trapped by their bond. Not trapped physically, emotionally. Now imagine that. The person who understands you more than anyone, becoming the person you cannot escape. That's heartbreaking. Then came the moment people still talk about. In 1993, the twins were transferred to another facility. During the trip, Jennifer became unresponsive, and later she died. Jennifer was only 29 years old, and reports later suggested inflammation of the heart, called myocarditis. But the sadness of it and what happened afterwards left people unsettled, because after Jennifer died, June reportedly changed. She began speaking more, living more independently, connecting more openly, almost as if something had been released. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean there was anything supernatural happening, but emotionally, people struggle with the timing. And maybe that's why this story continues haunting people, because unlike most mysteries, there isn't one big reveal. No shocking confession, no hidden villain, just a difficult question. How much of who we are comes from the people closest to us? And what happens when those connections become too powerful? Now, before we finish, I just want to ask you something, and be honest. Have you ever had someone in your life that you felt you couldn't imagine yourself without? Now imagine building your entire world around that connection, and then one day, that world changes. You know, I don't think this story scares people because of the silence. I think it scares people because it reminds us how deeply human beings need connection, and how sometimes, when people feel misunderstood by the world, they stop trying to join it, and instead, they build one of their own. Two sisters, one private world, and a silence people still don't fully understand. From my coast to yours, have a wonderful night.